All right, let's dive right into this explainer, because today we're going to completely change how you view two of the most powerful AI systems out there. I mean, you've definitely used both ChatGPT and Gemini. You've probably typed a prompt into one, then pasted the exact same prompt into the other just to see what happens. And if you're like most people, you've wondered what the real difference is underneath it all. Well, today, we're going to break that down using some fascinating source material that looks at the very shape of how these AI models actually think.
You know, it's the question literally everyone asks, right? Which AI is actually smarter? But as we're going to uncover today, it's actually the exact wrong thing to be asking. It creates this false competition that completely masks how these systems truly operate. It leads us to judge them on this sliding scale of intelligence, when in reality, we should be judging them on their fundamental behaviors.
So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at the trap of the surface, followed by the hidden mechanics. After that, we'll run the ambiguity test. Next, we'll map this to the real-world application. And finally, we'll wrap up with the friction rule. We are tearing down the illusion of sameness today, folks. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The trap of the surface, or the illusion of sameness.
Now, at a surface level, both Gemini and ChatGPT produce incredibly fluent, highly readable, and seemingly brilliant text. But instead of asking, well, which is better overall, we really need to shift our mental model entirely to a much more useful question: better for what kind of thinking? Once you see the systems underneath, the comparison completely stops being confusing. You stop treating them as identical contestants and start treating them as distinct instruments. Think of it this way. Imagine Gemini and ChatGPT as two highly skilled guides in the exact same busy city market. Both know the streets, both respond quickly, and for sure, both can get you to your destination. But one guide, they instinctively notice the whole market layout, taking in all the surrounding stalls and the broader context. The other guy, they just instinctively find the absolute sharpest, cleanest, most direct route through the crowd. It's the exact same city, but they have completely different instincts.
Moving on to Section 2. The hidden mechanics. Let's look at how these answers actually form.
A really common mistake is thinking these models are just mechanically filling in the blanks, one word at a time, or, on the flip side, that they're thinking exactly like a human brain does. Neither is true. Instead, they're prediction systems. They are constantly balancing invisible constraints in the background, juggling the topic so far, the tone of your conversation, your likely intent, relevance, and the kind of answer being produced. The next word isn't just chosen in a vacuum. It's chosen by literally listening to the rest of the paragraph it's currently building.
Picture this generation process like a person trying to answer a question while balancing a massive stack of plates. When faced with multiple good ways to answer, ChatGPT tends to keep that stack perfectly smooth, structured, and consistent. It loves a tight, centered output. Gemini, though, it's much more willing to stretch its arms out across different kinds of information, to broaden the context, even if that stack gets a little bit wider. The difference usually isn't that one knows the answer and the other doesn't. It's all about what shape of answer each system naturally tends to stabilize into.
Section 3. The ambiguity test. What happens when your prompts get messy?
There's a really profound takeaway from this source material here. It says, a model's strength is not only what it knows, but how it behaves when the answer is not obvious. Think about that. Every useful AI has to deal with vagueness and incomplete directions. When multiple answers could work, ChatGPT resolves that uncertainty by tightening up into a clear, usable explanation. It organizes the ambiguity. Gemini handles that exact same ambiguity by trying to absorb more of the available picture before settling on a response. It gathers the context.
So here's the absolutely crucial point. Please do not fall into the trap of assuming a polished answer automatically equals deep reasoning. Fluency is just a well-decorated shop display. It can look incredibly convincing and perfectly organized, but as we all know, a pretty shop window does not guarantee a strong inventory inside. Two people can read the exact same highly fluent output and walk away with entirely different impressions of how smart the AI is, simply because the final answer is partly a product of these style constraints, not just raw cognitive capability.
Section 4. The real-world application. Let's map these behaviors to the actual work you do.
So how do we actually use them? I like to think of them as two totally distinct personas. ChatGPT acts like a brilliant editor. Got a messy thought, a confused draft, or half-baked idea? It's going to help you sharpen that sentence and keep a crystal clear line from your question to the answer. Gemini, on the other hand, operates like a meticulous analyst. If you have scattered inputs or need to make sense of a broader situation where several distinct pieces of information need to be connected, well, it helps you gather those pieces before deciding what the final sentence should even say.
And right here is your ultimate cheat sheet. The golden rule: match the shape of your task to the natural bias of the AI. You don't match the topic, you match the task's shape. If your task is summarizing a clear idea or cleaning up a draft, what matters most is tight structure and conversational flow. That's almost always going to feel better with ChatGPT. But if your task is exploring a broad question or pulling from multiple completely different sources, what matters most there is context integration, and that feels significantly better with Gemini.
Let's make this super concrete with a practical scenario. Suppose you're prepping a presentation on the impact of AI on small businesses. You've got a class handout, a news article, and your own scattered discussion notes. The best tool to use here isn't determined by the topic of small business. Actually, if your very first step is just tidying up your rough, confused notes into a readable, linear explanation, you grab your editor, ChatGPT. But if your goal is to combine those three entirely different sources and figure out how they relate to the broader market picture, you bring in your analyst, Gemini.
Which brings us to Section 5, the friction rule, and choosing with intent.
Honestly, we can boil this entire explainer down to one single concept: friction. Think of friction as the resistance between your intention and the AI's output. The absolute best model for any given task is simply the one that creates the least friction between what you want to achieve and the shape of the answer the system naturally prefers to output. Calling one the best without a specific use case, that's just too vague to actually help you get your work done.
So do a quick run-through of these practical friction checks before you even start typing. Ask yourself, does this task need clarity or breadth? Structure or context? Am I editing a thought or assembling scattered pieces? Am I tightening a concept or expanding on it? If you can stop seeing them as these competing personalities fighting for a high score and just start judging them on these specific friction points, you're going to start switching tools with pure intention rather than just blind habit.
So the next time you open up a blank prompt, don't ask which AI is better. Don't fall back into the trap of the surface. Look closely at the problem sitting right in front of you. Look at the messy information you need to process and ask yourself this final question instead. For my next task, what shape of answer do I actually need? Once you figure out the shape of your problem, picking the perfect AI to solve it, it becomes completely effortless. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the shapes behind the systems.